Adwoa lived in a mansion that stood tall at the edge of the city, its wide walls and shining glass windows reminding everyone of the fortune her late husband had left behind. From the outside, people thought she had everything a person could ever want. Inside, she walked through halls that were silent, her footsteps echoing against marble floors. Her husband had been gone for years, and although time had dulled the sharpest part of her grief, it had not filled the hollow place inside her chest. She was admired by neighbors, respected by society, and envied by many. Yet none of those things warmed her heart at night or greeted her in the mornings. Each day felt the same. She would rise from her large bed, walk into her garden filled with roses and lilies, and watch the sun rise beyond the gates. Beyond that gate, people came and went, cars rolled by, and life seemed to move. Inside, life stood still. Servants bowed and greeted her politely, but there was no real connection in their eyes. They served her, but they did not see her. To them, she was only Madame Adwoa, the woman of wealth. The only person who ever seemed different was Kojo, the gateman. Kojo was younger than her, perhaps in his early 30s, strong from years of work, but with a calm gentleness in his manner. He was not like the rich men who often tried to charm her at social events, nor was he like the gossiping neighbors who envied her clothes and jewels. He was simple, but in his simplicity, he carried a peace that felt rare to her. Every morning when she walked through the estate, she noticed him. Kojo always stood straight at the gate, greeting her with respect. His voice was not loud, but it carried warmth. "Good morning, madam," he would say, and with that small greeting she felt seen, not as a wealthy widow or a figure in society, but simply as a person. Adwoa found herself slowing down her steps whenever she approached the gate. She would pause to adjust her scarf or look at the flowers, just so she could exchange a few extra words with him. At first, their conversations were short. She asked about the weather and he replied with a smile. She asked if he was doing well and he nodded politely. But little by little, those exchanges grew longer. He would tell her about the people passing by, about the laughter of school children who ran along the street, or about a neighbor who had lost their dog. He noticed small details of life outside the gate, and when he shared them, it felt like he was bringing pieces of the living world into her quiet, still home. Adwoa began to look forward to those moments. She would wake in the mornings, her heart heavy with the silence of the house, but as soon as she thought of Kojo's calm smile, something inside her lifted. It confused her at first. She had been surrounded by powerful men in her life, businessmen, leaders, men of influence who wore fine suits and spoke of money and politics. Yet none of them gave her the comfort that one simple smile from her gateman did. Her friends from high society often visited her, dressed in silk dresses, their voices filled with gossip. They laughed about scandals, mocked those with less wealth, and praised themselves for their own achievements. But as Adwoa sat among them, she often felt distant. Their words meant nothing to her. She wanted something real, something human. She wanted someone to see her, not her fortune. And in her quiet moments at the gate, Kojo gave her that. One afternoon, as the sun set in shades of orange and gold, Adwoa walked slowly toward the gate. Kojo stood as always, tall and steady. This time, however, she noticed the wear on his shoes, the calluses on his hands, the simple clothes he wore. He was a man of little means, yet he carried himself with dignity. Something stirred in her heart. Kojo greeted her with his usual smile. "Evening, madam," he said softly. She nodded, but her voice faltered. For a moment she could not find the right words. Instead, she asked a simple question. "Do you ever get tired, standing here all day?" Kojo's smile deepened and he shrugged lightly. "Sometimes. But it is not hard work when the people you serve treat you with respect." His answer lingered with her long after she returned to her room. That night, as she lay in her bed, she thought of his words. It had been years since anyone had spoken to her with such quiet honesty. Days turned into weeks, and Adwoa found herself seeking his presence more and more. She would stop by the gate not just to ask about the day but to listen. He told her stories from his village, about his mother who taught him kindness, about his younger sister who dreamed of becoming a nurse, about the struggles of growing up with little but finding joy in simple things. His stories carried warmth, and Adwoa listened like a thirsty traveler drinking from a spring. In return, she began to share small pieces of her own life. She told him about her late husband, about the empty halls of her mansion, about the loneliness that followed her no matter how many jewels she wore. Kojo listened with patience, never interrupting, never judging. His eyes, deep and gentle, made her feel safe enough to speak truths she had never shared with anyone. And so, a strange companionship began to form between them. To the world outside, Adwoa was still the wealthy widow, untouchable and distant. Kojo was still the humble gateman, unnoticed by society. But within the quiet moments at the gate, they were simply two human beings finding peace in each other's presence. For the first time in many years, Adwoa felt her heart stir with something more than loneliness. She did not yet name it, and perhaps she feared to. But in the soft glow of the evenings as she stood by the gate listening to Kojo's gentle voice, she felt alive again. It was the beginning of a story that no one in high society would ever expect. But for Adwoa, it was not about wealth, status, or what people thought. It was about the quiet peace she found in the most unexpected place, beside the humble gateman who greeted her every day with a smile. Adwoa never imagined that the gate to her mansion, the very symbol of her wealth and separation from the world, would one day become the place where her heart found comfort. In the beginning, she and Kojo spoke little beyond polite words. "Good morning, madam," or "Good evening, madam," were all that passed between them. Yet each time she heard his voice, she felt something calm settle inside her. It was a small thing, but in her life of luxury and loneliness, even small things mattered. One afternoon, when the sky was heavy with clouds, Adwoa stopped by the gate as usual. She had nothing urgent to say, but she lingered. Kojo noticed and asked, "Is everything well, madam?" His voice was not filled with formality, but with genuine concern. Adwoa nodded and, almost without thinking, asked him about his family. It was the first personal question she had ever asked. Kojo hesitated, then smiled softly. He told her that his mother lived in a small village far away, and that he sent money whenever he could to support her. He spoke of his younger sister, Amma, who dreamed of studying nursing but struggled because school fees were high. As he spoke, Adwoa listened with care. His words painted pictures of hardship, but they were not bitter. There was hope in his voice, a quiet strength that made her admire him. 4 days after, she thought of his stories. She thought of Kojo walking to the money transfer office to send what little he earned, of his sister waiting with hope in her heart, of his mother who still prayed for him. Adwoa realized that while her mansion was full of everything money could buy, Kojo's life was full of love, responsibility, and quiet sacrifice. The next time she met him, she shared something of her own. She spoke of her childhood, of how her father had once been a strict man but had taught her the value of hard work. She told him how her husband's death had left her in an empty house, and how the silence of her home often pressed on her chest like a weight. Kojo listened, not interrupting, not offering empty comfort, but simply hearing her. His presence made her feel lighter. Soon their conversations became a daily ritual. Adwoa would step out, pretending to check the flowers or admire the evening sky, but really she longed for those few minutes by the gate. Kojo would greet her warmly, and together they would talk. Sometimes it was about serious matters, about life, loss, or responsibility. Other times it was light-hearted. Kojo had a way of making small jokes, simple but sincere, and to her surprise, Adwoa often found herself laughing. Her laughter was rare. 4 years she had attended dinners, social events, and gatherings where people told clever stories, but none of them touched her heart. Their jokes were often sharp, filled with pride or gossip. Kojo's humor was different. He could laugh at the little things, at the stubborn rooster near his old home, at the way children ran through puddles during the rains, at how he once tripped carrying too many baskets for his mother. His laughter was pure, and when Adwoa joined him, it felt like she was remembering a part of herself she had long forgotten. Adwoa noticed, too, that Kojo never once treated her like the wealthy widow society saw her as. To him, she was not Madame Adwoa, the woman with diamonds and power. She was simply Adwoa, someone who could be spoken to with honesty. When she asked him questions, he did not hide behind polite answers to please her. He told her the truth. He admitted when life was difficult, when he felt tired, or when he worried for his sister's future. And in return, he gave her a safe space to speak her own truth. The more they talked, the more she admired his wisdom. Though he had not studied in universities or traveled across countries, Kojo had an understanding of life that felt deep and clear. He spoke of patience, of humility, of treating people with kindness. He believed that respect mattered more than riches, that peace was better than pride. His words stayed with her long after their conversations ended. Adwoa began to notice a change in herself. She woke in the mornings with a small sense of excitement, knowing that by evening she would pass the gate and hear Kojo's calm voice. She began smiling more even when she was alone. Her servants noticed but did not dare to ask. Her friends from high society noticed too, but when they asked, she simply brushed it off. How could she explain to them that her brightest joy came not from their grand parties or endless gossip, but from the humble gateman who stood by her gate each day? Sometimes she questioned herself. She wondered if it was proper, if it was wise, if it was something others would ever understand. But then she remembered the way Kojo's eyes looked when he listened to her, not with judgment but with quiet respect. That respect was rare in her world and she could not let it go. Their friendship grew like a plant watered each day, steady and natural. Adwoa no longer felt as though her mansion was a prison of silence. With Kojo, even the ordinary moments became meaningful. She admired how he could find joy in simplicity, how he carried dignity in hardship, and how he gave her something no one else could, a sense of being truly seen. One evening, as the sun set behind the tall gates, Adwoa found herself laughing again at one of his jokes. For a moment, the years of sorrow and loneliness lifted from her shoulders. She looked at him and thought, this man, who owns nothing but his honesty, has given me more happiness than wealth ever has. What began at the gate as polite greetings had now grown into something brighter, something neither of them had planned but both of them needed. And though society would never understand it, Adwoa knew that this simple friendship had become the light of her days. ChatGPT said. Adwoa's life was no longer the same. The mansion that had once felt like a cage of gold had slowly turned into a place of quiet joy, all because of Kojo. Every evening, after the day's affairs were done, she found herself drifting toward the garden where he often lingered by the gate. At first, she would stand at a distance asking about the weather, the estate, or the flowers. But soon, her feet began to carry her further in. She would invite him to walk with her, sometimes only for a few minutes, sometimes for much longer. Kojo always hesitated at first. He was a man who knew boundaries, a man aware of his position in her household. Yet her voice was gentle, her smile warm, and she asked not as Madame Adwoa but as a woman seeking company. Slowly, his steps grew braver and he began to walk by her side. Together, they strolled through the winding paths of the garden. The scent of night-blooming jasmine filled the air, and the stars above looked down silently as if guarding their secret. In those walks, Adwoa found herself speaking words she had never spoken to anyone else. She told him of her fears, of the emptiness she felt despite the wealth around her. She spoke of her late husband, not with bitterness but with honesty, how he had provided her with everything except companionship. She shared the loneliness that grew after his passing, the way the silence of her home pressed against her heart each night. Kojo listened. He did not interrupt or pretend to have all the answers. Sometimes he simply nodded, his eyes steady and kind. Other times he shared his own struggles, the long nights when he worried about his mother's health in the village, the heavy responsibility of supporting his younger sister, and the doubts that sometimes weighed on him. Their words, like two rivers, began to flow together, and in that flow, a bond deepened. Adwoa soon realized that she was looking forward to these evenings more than anything else in her life. The gossip of high society no longer mattered. The polished halls of her mansion no longer held her attention. What she longed for were those simple walks, the sound of Kojo's voice, the way his laughter echoed in the garden. One evening, under the silver glow of the moon, they sat on a stone bench in the middle of the garden. The air was cool and the world felt quiet. Adwoa's heart was restless. For days she had felt something growing inside her, a truth she could no longer keep hidden. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. Finally, with a voice soft but steady, she said, "Kojo, there is something I must tell you." He turned to her, his face calm but expectant. She took a breath, her eyes meeting his. "I have tried to ignore it, to tell myself it is foolish. But I cannot anymore. I have come to care for you, not as a friend only but as someone She paused, her voice breaking for a moment. "As someone I love." The words hung in the air like fragile glass. Kojo's heart pounded. For a moment he said nothing. He looked away, his thoughts racing. He was a gateman and she was a wealthy widow. Their worlds were as far apart as the sky and the earth. His silence stretched on and Adwoa lowered her eyes, fear tightening her chest. But then, slowly he spoke. "Madame Adwoa," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "When I first came here, I promised myself never to overstep, never to forget my place. I thought that all I could give was respect and duty. But with every day, with every word we shared, I began to feel something I could not control. I fought it in silence, telling myself it was impossible. Yet when I look at you now," he paused, his eyes searching hers, "I see the truth. I too have grown to love you." Her breath caught and her eyes filled with tears. She reached for his hand and though he hesitated, he did not pull away. Their fingers touched, and in that small gesture, the walls of status, wealth, and fear began to crumble. That night everything changed. Their laughter became sweeter, their silences more meaningful. The garden, once only a place of beauty, became the cradle of their love. Under the stars, they walked as equals, not as mistress and gateman, but as two souls who had found in each other what the world had denied them. Kojo still carried his humility, but now there was a spark in his eyes when he looked at her, a spark that only love could bring. Adwoa still carried her dignity, but now her steps were lighter, her heart freer. She no longer felt like a woman defined by her wealth or her loss. She felt alive, as if the world had given her a second chance. Days passed and their bond deepened even more. They still kept their secret from others, knowing that society would never understand. But in the quiet of the garden, they spoke dreams aloud. Kojo told her how he wished to see his sister become a nurse, and Adwoa promised to help. She spoke of her desire to live not just for herself, but for love, and he promised never to let her feel alone again. Sometimes, when she laughed at his simple jokes, Kojo would look at her and think, "This is not just a rich widow. This is the woman who holds my heart." And sometimes, when she saw the gentleness in his eyes, Adwoa would think, "This is not just a gateman. This is the man I was meant to find." Their love was fragile, like a secret flame hidden from the wind, yet it burned bright. In a world that measured worth by wealth and status, they had found something rare, a connection of souls. And though they knew challenges lay ahead, that night under the stars had already changed everything. From then on, every walk in the garden, every shared word, and every quiet glance carried a deeper meaning. Their friendship had become love, and love had given them courage. For the first time in years, Adwoa felt whole. And for the first time in his life, Kojo felt seen not as a servant, but as a man worthy of love. The whispers began softly at first, like a wind brushing against the walls of Adwoa's mansion. A housemaid noticed how Madame lingered too long at the gate. A gardener saw Kojo and Adwoa walking together in the garden when they thought no one was watching. Soon, the murmurs grew louder, and before long the entire household buzzed with gossip. The staff, who once bowed in respect, now exchanged knowing glances when she passed. Some pitied her, believing she had lost her mind after her husband's death. Others judged her silently, convinced that she had lowered herself beyond reason. The story did not remain within the mansion walls. It spilled into the neighborhood, where tongues wagged without mercy. Adwoa was not blind to it. She saw the way conversations halted when she entered a room. She heard the faint laughter behind her back, the whispers of the widow and her gateman. Even her closest relatives grew restless. One afternoon her cousin Ya visited, his face filled with concern. "Adwoa," he began, trying to sound calm, "these rumors are spreading quickly. People are talking. You must think of your family name, of your late husband's legacy. This relationship with Kojo, it will ruin you." Adwoa met his gaze, her expression firm. "Ruin me? Or free me, Ya? For the first time in years I feel alive. Is that ruin?" Her cousin sighed heavily, shaking his head. "People will never accept it. You will become a joke in the very circles that once respected you." Adwoa's voice was steady, though her heart ached at his words. "Then let me be their joke. At least I will not be a prisoner in their approval." Kojo, meanwhile, faced trials of his own. Neighbors who once greeted him with warmth now looked at him with suspicion. Some men mocked him openly, calling him a fortune hunter. "Kojo has found the easy way out," they laughed. "He wants wealth, not love." Others sneered behind his back, saying he had trapped the widow with sweet words. The weight of their judgment pressed heavily on him. At night, when he was alone, he often wondered if he had been selfish by allowing his feelings to grow. He worried that Adwoa bore too much of the burden, that she would suffer because of him. Yet every time he thought of stepping away, he remembered the look in her eyes, the sincerity, the peace she found only with him. That gave him the courage to endure. Still, the storm around them grew. Invitations to social events that once flooded Adwoa's doorstep became fewer. Old friends avoided her, whispering excuses but revealing their true thoughts in their absence. Her name was discussed in circles of high society with tones of mockery. "Imagine," they scoffed, "a woman of her stature falling for a gateman. Such a disgrace." But Adwoa did not waver. One evening, as the sun set and the garden glowed with the last light of day, she sat with Kojo beneath the great oak tree. His face was tense, his eyes clouded with worry. "Madam," he said quietly, his voice breaking with conflict, "perhaps they are right. Perhaps I am not worthy. Maybe it is better if I step away before the shame becomes too heavy for you." Her hand reached for his, holding it firmly. "Do not call me madam when we are here," she said softly. Then her voice grew stronger, carrying the weight of her conviction. "Kojo, listen to me. They can whisper, they can mock, they can even turn their backs. But they cannot tell me whom to love. I will not live my life by their chains. You are not ashamed to me. You are my choice. Tears welled in his eyes at her words. No one had ever defended him so fiercely. No one had ever declared so boldly that his worth was not defined by his position. The next morning, Adwoa made her stand clear. At a family gathering, when relatives once again pressed her to end the relationship, she rose to her feet. Her voice, calm but unyielding, filled the room. I will not hide in shadows. I will not pretend to live by their rules while my heart suffers in silence. I love Kojo. Yes, a Gateman. And if that love makes me foolish in their eyes, then let me be foolish. But I will not be ashamed. Gasps filled the air and silence followed. No one expected her to speak so openly, so boldly. Some left in anger, others in disbelief. But Adwoa felt lighter, as if a burden had lifted from her shoulders. Word of her declaration spread quickly. The gossip only grew, but now it carried a new tone, shock at her courage. Many still mocked, yet a few quietly admired her strength. Some even whispered that perhaps she had done what others only dreamed of, choosing love over society's chains. Adwoa and Kojo stood side by side, the storm swirling around them, but their bond unbroken. They shared moments of doubt, yes, but also moments of unshakable certainty. For every cruel word, there was a touch of the hand that reminded them of their truth. For every mocking laugh, there was the quiet comfort of walking together under the stars. Adwoa's wealth no longer defined her, nor did Kojo's role as a gateman. What defined them was the courage to love openly, even when the world tried to break them apart. And though the path ahead promised more trials, Adwoa's heart remained steady. She would not bow to whispers. She would not live in fear. For she knew one thing with certainty. Love, once found, was worth every battle. And no judgment, no gossip, no ridicule could take that away. The morning after Adwoa's bold declaration, the air in her mansion felt different. It was as if her words still lingered in the walls, strong and unyielding. She had spoken her truth, and now the world would answer. Some doors closed to her forever, while others quietly opened in ways she had not expected. Adwoa and Kojo stood hand in hand, ready to walk whatever path came their way. Not everyone accepted them, and they knew that. Some relatives stopped visiting altogether, offended by her decision. A few friends, once loyal, now avoided her in public, unwilling to be connected with her scandal. At gatherings, people whispered behind her back, shaking their heads as though she had thrown away everything respectable. Yet Adwoa no longer flinched at their judgment. She had already paid the price of loneliness once, locked inside a mansion of silence after her husband's death. She would not pay it again. Kojo, too, learned to carry the weight of his new life. At first he feared every look cast his way. The stares in the market, the mocking laughter of men who once worked beside him, it cut him deeply. But as weeks passed he began to see a change. Not everyone mocked. Some nodded at him with quiet respect. Others, though silent, carried a look of admiration. They saw not just a gateman, but a man who had been brave enough to love without apology. In the quiet of their shared moments, Adwoa and Kojo found the strength to face the storm. Each evening they would walk together in the garden or sit beneath the stars, their hands linked, their voices low as they dreamed of the future. For Adwoa, the emptiness of wealth was replaced by the warmth of companionship. For Kojo, the walls of his small guard post were traded for a home filled with laughter and light. Though the world around them continued to speak, time began to shift opinions. Some who once mocked grew silent when they saw that the widow had not fallen into ruin. She looked happier than she had in years, her face glowing with peace. Her laughter rang louder than the clinking glasses at any high society dinner. Slowly, the whispers lost their power, for it was hard to laugh at love when it proved itself so strong. Adwoa's mansion, once a place of formality, began to feel like a real home. Kojo did not try to fill the shoes of her late husband. Instead, he walked beside her as himself, with humility and quiet strength. He continued his simple habits, rising early, working with his hands, speaking honestly. His presence brought balance to Adwoa's world of luxury, teaching her to cherish not what money could buy, but the small, priceless gifts of life. A shared meal, a kind word, a touch of the hand at the end of a long day. Some members of the community began to admire them. Young women saw in Adwoa an example of courage, proof that a woman could choose her own path despite the weight of expectation. Young men respected Kojo for standing tall in the face of ridicule, never hiding, never apologizing for who he was. Their love story, once whispered as a scandal, began to take on the shape of a lesson. Of course, there were still those who disapproved, and perhaps they always would. But Adwoa and Kojo no longer measured their lives by such voices. They measured it by the peace they found each morning when they shared breakfast together, by the comfort of knowing that at the end of each day, they had each other. Years passed and their bond only grew deeper. The loneliness that once haunted Adwoa faded like a shadow at sunrise. Kojo, once just the gateman standing outside her mansion, became her partner in every sense. Together they built not a kingdom of riches but a sanctuary of love. The community too began to change. Over time their story was told not as one of shame, but as one of courage. Neighbors repeated it with softer tones, saying, "Do you remember the widow who loved her gateman?" They proved that love is stronger than status. The children who once heard gossip now grew up hearing a tale of hope, learning that the heart is greater than wealth. Adwoa herself felt freer than she ever had before. She no longer dressed to impress the elite, no longer bent beneath the weight of their approval. She lived simply but fully, walking through life with the man she loved by her side. She discovered that true wealth was not found in gold or estates, but in laughter shared in quiet moments, in hands held tightly against the storms of life. Kojo, too, grew into his new role, no longer defined by his old uniform. He was no longer seen as merely the man at the gate, but as a husband, a partner, and a symbol of dignity. Together they became an image of love's defiance, a reminder that even the strictest walls of society could not confine the heart. In the end, it did not matter who turned their backs or who whispered in the shadows. What mattered was that they had chosen each other. Their love, once mocked, now stood strong as proof that true happiness cannot be bought or stolen by opinion. Adwoa and Kojo built a life not of riches but of love, and that life became their victory. It was not a story of scandal anymore but of freedom, courage, and devotion. They had faced the world together and discovered that when love is real, nothing else matters. And so, Adwoa, the widow of great fortune, and Kojo, the humble gateman, walked forward into a life of peace. Not bound by wealth, not bound by society, but bound forever by the choice of their hearts. The end.